I flew 11 hours to surprise my dad at his 60th birthday party. I walked through the door with a gift and a smile. He barely hugged me. Then came the photos. The photographer lined everyone up in the living room. My dad stood at the center with his new wife, Lisa, and her 2 kids from her first marriage. I stepped into the frame. He looked at me and said, "No photos with you. Just family. 40 guests. Every single one of them heard it." I stood there, frozen, while Lisa smiled and whispered, "It's nothing personal. We're keeping it cohesive." I wanted to scream. I wanted to walk out. But I didn't do either. Because I had a document in my carry-on that would make him regret every single word. Where are you watching from, and what time is it there? Drop your city in the comments. And hit that like button so I know you're here. Here's the thing about being erased from a family photo. Sometimes you're the only one who actually owns the house. Let me rewind. My mom died when I was 12. Breast cancer. It took 18 months. My dad remarried 2 years later. Her name was Lisa. She was polished, image-obsessed, and always talking about optics. I became the kid who didn't fit the aesthetic. Lisa had 2 children from her previous marriage. They were younger, easier to mold. I was the reminder of a life my dad wanted to forget. By the time I turned 16, I knew I was on my own. I worked 2 jobs through high school. I got into a state school on partial scholarship and covered the rest with loans and night shifts. I graduated with a degree in computer science and landed a job at a startup that eventually gave me equity. I built my life from nothing. And I saved everything: emails, texts, receipts, legal papers. It's a habit you develop when people stop keeping promises. The only person who stayed constant was my grandma. My mom's mother. She lived in a beautiful old house an hour outside the city. When I couldn't afford rent during college, she let me stay in her guest room. When I graduated, she was the only family member in the crowd. 3 years ago, she got sick. One afternoon, she sat me down at her kitchen table and said, "I'm making sure you're protected." I didn't understand what she meant. She passed 6 months later. The funeral was small. My dad showed up late and left early. A week after that, he moved into her house. He told me it was temporary, just until he and Lisa figured things out. That was 3 years ago. I never questioned it. I thought grief had made him sentimental. I thought he wanted to be close to her memory. I was wrong. 2 months ago, I got a text from my dad. "We're throwing a party for my 60th. It'd be great if you could come. It's at the family estate." The family estate. That's what he called Grandma's house now. I hadn't seen him in over a year. I thought maybe this was an olive branch. A chance to rebuild something. I booked a last-minute flight from Singapore, where I was working remotely. 11 hours in economy. I didn't care. I was hopeful. When I arrived, the house was decorated like a magazine spread. String lights, catered appetizers, a bartender. Lisa opened the door. She looked me up and down and said, "Oh, you came." My dad was in the living room holding court with his friends. I walked over. He gave me a half hug, the kind you give a distant cousin. "Glad you made it," he said. Then he turned back to his conversation. I stood there with my suitcase, invisible. An hour later, the photographer gathered everyone for pictures. My dad positioned himself in the center. Lisa on one side, her 2 kids on the other. His brother and sister-in-law filled in the edges. I stepped forward. He held up his hand. "Not you. Just family." I thought I misheard. "What?" "We're keeping it cohesive," Lisa said, still smiling for the camera. "You understand." I didn't move. I couldn't. My dad reached into his wallet, pulled out $200 and handed it to me. "For your cab. Thanks for coming." 40 people watched him do it. I took the money, and I walked out. I went back to my hotel and sat on the edge of the bed, shaking. I opened Instagram. The photos were already up. Lisa had posted a carousel. Perfect family night. Everyone was tagged. I wasn't in a single frame. In the group shots I'd seen the photographer take before I left, I'd been cropped out, erased. I scrolled through the comments. Hearts and congratulations. Someone wrote, beautiful family. I felt like I was disappearing. Then my phone buzzed. A voicemail. It was from a number I didn't recognize, but the voice was familiar. One of my dad's friends. It was meant for someone else. He must have misdialed. Yeah, good call keeping the troubled daughter out of the album. Keeps things simpler. Troubled daughter. I'd put myself through school. I had a career. I'd never asked him for a dime. And I was the troubled one? I almost booked a flight home that night. I pulled up my boarding passes on my phone. 11 hours for nothing. $200 in cash like a tip for showing up. I opened my email to find a distraction. And that's when I saw it. A message I'd received 2 months earlier. From an attorney. Subject line, RE final recorded deed. I'd skimmed it at the time. Legal paperwork about Grandma's estate. I thought it was just a formality. I opened it again. And I started reading. By the second paragraph, my hands stopped shaking. The email was from the estate attorney who had handled my grandma's will. It was a confirmation that the deed to her house had been recorded 3 years earlier, before she passed. Not in my dad's name, in mine. I read it 3 times. Grantor, Margaret Ann Harris. Grantee, and then my full legal name. The transfer had happened while my grandma was still alive. A gift deed, signed, notarized, recorded with the county. I opened a new tab and pulled up the county property records. Owner of record, me. The taxes were being auto-paid from an escrow account I'd set up years ago and forgotten about. My grandma had added me as a co-signer on her accounts during college. When the house transferred, the payment system rolled over. I'd been paying the property taxes on my own house for 3 years without realizing it. My dad had been living there, rent-free, in a house that wasn't his. The family estate he'd thrown a party in? Mine. The house he'd kicked me out of? Legally mine. I sat there in that hotel room, staring at the screen. He threw me out of my own house. And he had no idea. I didn't cry anymore. I opened my laptop, searched for real estate attorneys in the area, and started making calls. Because if he wanted to play family politics, I had receipts, and I was just getting started. The next morning, my phone rang. It was Lisa. We need to talk about your behavior last night. I didn't say anything. You made a scene. You embarrassed your father, and now you're telling people you have some claim to property that isn't yours. I hadn't told anyone, but I stayed quiet. Our attorney is going to send you a quitclaim deed. You're going to sign it and end this fantasy. If you don't, we'll file a defamation suit. She hung up. 20 minutes later, my dad texted me. Lisa's right. You've always been dramatic. Don't embarrass yourself. Our attorney is copied on this. Attached was a PDF, a blank quitclaim form with my name already filled in at the top. It released all claims, right, title, and interest in the property. They wanted me to sign away a house I already owned. I didn't respond. Instead, I did some searching. I ran the address through a few real estate sites. And there it was, a draft listing on Zillow. Coming soon. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, original hardwood floors, listed by a local brokerage. Estimated sale price, $1.2 million. They weren't just living in my house. They were planning to sell it. I checked the listing agent's name and pulled the paperwork through a public records request. My dad had signed an exclusive listing agreement 1 week ago. He'd represented himself as the sole owner. That was fraud. I forwarded everything to the attorney I'd contacted the night before. Her response came in under an hour. We need to move fast. My attorney worked fast. She pulled the full title history on the property. Clean chain. No mortgage, no liens. Single owner since the deed was recorded. Me. Then she got a copy of the listing agreement my dad had signed with the brokerage. Right there in his handwriting, owner signature. He'd signed a legal contract claiming he owned a house that wasn't his. But that wasn't even the worst part. My attorney subpoenaed his email correspondence with the brokerage. And buried in the thread was a forwarded message between him and Lisa. Lisa had written, "Once we close, we'll have enough for the beachfront condo and we can finally cut ties with your past. My dad replied, agreed. Fresh start. They were going to take my inheritance, sell it, and use the money to fund their next chapter. And cut ties with the past meant me. I stared at the email for a long time. This wasn't just about a house. It was about erasing me completely. My attorney flagged the listing agreement as potential fraud and sent a formal complaint to the brokerage. She also drafted a notice. As the legal owner of the property, you are hereby notified that any claim of ownership by third parties is false. This listing is unauthorized and must be withdrawn immediately. The brokerage pulled the listing within 2 hours. Now I understood. They didn't just want me gone. They wanted to steal my inheritance and pretend I never existed. My attorney didn't stop there. She ran a background check, legal, for litigation purposes. What she found explained everything. Lisa had $87,000 in credit card debt, 2 accounts in collections, a failed boutique business she'd tried to launch 3 years ago. My dad's LinkedIn showed his last consulting contract had ended 24 months earlier. No current income listed. They'd been living rent-free in my house, paying only utilities for 3 years. The property taxes? I'd been covering them the whole time without knowing. They had no mortgage, no rent, and they still couldn't stay afloat. The $1.2 million sale wasn't just a plan. It was their only way out. My attorney put it simply. They're judgment-proof on their own, but they're asset-rich by proximity. They need your house to survive. That's when it clicked. The party, the photos, the rejection. It wasn't about me being troubled or not fitting the aesthetic. It was about control. If they could erase me from the family narrative, they could erase me from the estate, too. They'd been setting the stage for months, maybe years, but they made one critical mistake. They never checked the deed. I told my attorney exactly what I wanted to do. She smiled and said, "Let's make it official." Now I knew why they acted, and I knew exactly how to respond. My attorney drafted the notice on her firm's letterhead. It was called a notice to quit. In plain language, it said this: I am the legal owner of the property. You have been living here under an informal license. That license is now terminated. You have 60 days to vacate or sign a lease at fair market rent. Fair market rent in that area? $3,400 a month. She sent copies to my dad, to Lisa, to the brokerage, and to the title company they'd planned to use for the sale. The brokerage responded first. They opened an internal investigation into my dad's misrepresentation and formally apologized to me. The title company flagged the file and refused to proceed. The sale was dead. Then my attorney did something brilliant. She scheduled a meeting, family discussion to resolve property matters. She sent the invitation from her office email. Professional, calm, neutral location, the house itself. My dad agreed immediately. I think he thought I was coming to negotiate. Maybe even to apologize. He had no idea what was coming. I flew back 2 days later. I didn't pack much. Just my laptop, the deed, and a printed copy of every document my attorney had gathered. The meeting was set for 2 p.m. on a Saturday. I arrived 15 minutes early with my attorney. We sat down at my grandma's old oak dining table, the same table where she told me she'd protect me. And I waited. My dad walked in at exactly 2 p.m. Lisa was with him. So was their attorney, a solo family law practitioner I'd never heard of. They sat across from me. My attorney opened her folder. Thank you for coming. We're here to clarify the ownership of this property and provide notice of next steps. My dad crossed his arms. This is ridiculous. My mother left me this house. My attorney slid a document across the table. This is the recorded deed. Signed and notarized 3 years before your mother passed. The property was transferred to your daughter as a gift. It's been in her name ever since. His attorney picked it up. Read it, went quiet. That's not possible, Lisa said. She was senile. This is elder abuse. My attorney didn't blink. She slid over another document. This is a letter from your mother-in-law's neurologist, dated the same month as the deed. It certifies that she was of sound mind, with no cognitive deficits, fully competent to make legal decisions. Lisa's mouth opened. Nothing came out. My dad stared at the paper. She told me, she said I'd inherit. What someone tells you and what is legally recorded are two different things, my attorney said. Then she opened her laptop and turned it toward them. This is the listing agreement you signed last week. You represented yourself as the sole owner. That's false. The brokerage has withdrawn the listing and opened an internal investigation. His attorney leaned back and said quietly, "Stop talking." But my dad wasn't done. "You can't just kick me out. I've been living here for 3 years. I spoke for the first time. You're right, you have. In my house, rent-free." I slid a printed lease across the table. "Fair market rate. Standard terms. You can sign this and stay. $3,400 a month." He shoved it away. "This is insane." "You're doing this because of a photo?" I stayed calm. "No. I'm doing this because you tried to sell my house without my knowledge. You erased me from your life and tried to erase me from my inheritance." My attorney placed the final document on the table. "This is a notice to quit. You have 60 days to vacate the premises. If you fail to do so, we will file for eviction." The room went silent. Their attorney whispered something to my dad. He stood up. So did Lisa. They didn't say a word. They walked out. I stayed in my chair, at my grandma's table, in my house. I didn't need a photo with him. I had the deed. They moved out in 45 days. New drama, no final conversation. A U-Haul in the driveway one Saturday morning, and by Sunday night the house was empty. I hired a locksmith and changed every lock. I hired a cleaning service and had the place deep cleaned. And then I made a decision. I didn't want to live there. Too many ghosts. But I didn't want to sell it out of spite either. So I hired a property manager and listed it for rent. A month later, I signed a lease with a young family, a nurse and a teacher with 2 kids. Good people. The kind of tenants my grandma would have loved. They moved in at $3,400 a month. Fair rate, good terms. I kept the house in the family just like she wanted. The brokerage sent my dad a formal letter. He was flagged in their system and couldn't sign any future listing agreements without proof of ownership. Lisa's Boutique LLC dissolved a few weeks later. I don't know what happened to her debt, and honestly, I don't care. 3 months after they moved out, my dad sent me a text. "I was wrong. I'm sorry." I stared at it for a long time. I wrote back, "I accept your apology. But respect isn't optional anymore?" He didn't respond. We haven't spoken since. I don't know if we ever will. And I'm okay with that. Some relationships can't survive what they were built on. And that's not my failure. It's just the truth. I took a portion of the rental income and set up a small scholarship fund in my grandma's name, the Margaret Ann Harris Memorial Grant. It goes to first-generation college students studying healthcare or education. The first award went out last spring. I didn't go to the ceremony, but I saw the photo. A young woman holding the certificate, smiling. That felt like enough. Here's what I learned. You can't erase people from your life and expect to keep what they gave you. Love isn't a transaction, and neither is family. But boundaries? Those are non-negotiable. I didn't fight for revenge. I fought for respect, and I got it. Not from them, from myself. This story is a fictionalized dramatization for entertainment purposes and is not legal or financial advice. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to prove your worth to a family member who underestimated you? How did you handle it? Drop your story in the comments. I read every single one, and if you made it this far, hit that subscribe button. You're part of this community now. Thanks for listening. And remember, always check the deed.